So welcome to the policy session. The idea behind this session was, so we've had lots of discussions on the use of small sensors. Are they being used for policy applications or policy actions? So we have a list of 3 or 4 speakers for you who will take us through what they are doing in their cities. I am supported by Dr. Rebecca Garland, who's online, and Victor Indasi, who will manage the Q&A. So we really look forward to an interesting discussion. We've already had lots of interest on, Ghana EPA and how they do regulations and standards. Dr. Alex is a tough guy. You can ask him similar questions. So I want to welcome Alex as our first presenter. Dr. Alex Ndyabakira is from the Kampala Capital City Authority, and he's an officer there. So Alex, please, welcome.
Good morning, team. My name is Alex. I work for the Kampala Capital City Authority to coordinate the air quality management efforts. Allow me to speak to you about the lessons learned from our network, which is predominantly low-cost monitors. Next slide. This city has about 1.8 million inhabitants, residents, but this population more than doubles during the day, about 5 million. It's about 182 square meters, with about 13 of those on water. We're bordered by Lake Victoria. Next slide. Our journey is fairly new. We started the practical air quality monitoring efforts in 2018, but planning way earlier in about 2014. So in 2018, we decided to take an evidence-based journey. So we initiated with a benchmarking trip to some of the cities in US that was supported by the US Embassy. And on return, did a baseline air quality assessment, because there was no monitor then, to understand if indeed we were polluted and what were the optimal sites for the sensors. And these were deployed a year later with the support of European Union in 2019 to early 2020. We used 2020, 2021 to understand the levels of pollution. And in late 2021, we finalized the development of the Clean Air Action Plan, which consolidates all our efforts to mitigate air pollution-related issues, and then started implementing this in 2020. Next slide. Just here is a snapshot of the distribution of our sensor network in the city. It's the same picture taken on the same day. On the left, in the morning at around 10 a.m., you can see that everything is red. And on the right, at about 5 p.m., when people are beginning to leave offices on the same day. I'm sure you're familiar with the color codes, yellow and green for good or moderate. And then the other side is polluted. Next slide. Here, this is data from one of the reference stations, and we give credit to the GeoHealth Hub, East Africa, where Chile comes from. We have a team of these investigators in Uganda. And here you can see the air pollution trends from 2018 to 2021. This is reference grade station data. It's not low cost sensor data. On a few of the days, assuming the 25 as the cutoff for WHO, you can see that we are able to get to the deadline, to the cutoff. But largely this was during the COVID-induced lockdowns. Next slide. So with the air quality in monitoring data on board, you still realize that you need additional evidence if you're able to make certain decisions to improve air quality. Remember, for most developed countries, you're looking at mitigation measures that have multiple community benefits. No one is going to find something that only improves air quality if you do not indicate how it also improves other aspects of life. This data of associations between air pollution and health is from the East African GeoHealth Hub. They're talking about collaborations earlier. indicating that on average, 20% of our mortality in the city is attributed or can be attributed to air pollution. This is assuming that the WHO cutoff is 5, which is generally the topmost cutoff. Next slide. The second evidence we thought we needed, of course, there are many evidences that you would need to support your decision-making and convince policymakers, was energy access. While a significant number of households in the city is connected to the national grid and they have access to clean energy, over 90% of households in the city rely on solar biomass as their primary source of energy for cooking. And this is one of the main sources of, sources of pollution in most cities, but also most institutions, ranging from hotels to learning institutions and any other institutions, almost largely use solar biomass for energy. And these are located in the city. Next slide. The third one was we want to target efforts to mitigate the air pollution. And so we started, this is ongoing, how we are launching the source attribution and study and emissions inventory. We are done with data collection for about 90 samples. That's a period of about 3 to 4 months. And we hope that by end of the year, we'll have this, so we'll know which sector is polluting most, and that guides targeting of resources. Next slide. We have also notes that to convince the masses, but also the policymakers, we need to leverage strength from different sectors. So we can leverage on strength of the air pollution network to support other sectors, but also leverage on other sectors to support air quality management. And here is an example where we used the air quality levels during the COVID lockdowns to actually understand if people were adhering to the restrictions or not. Because then on some days you would have peaks when you don't expect them, and then you're wondering whether actually people are home or all factories are working or cars are moving. I'm not sure the air core team is here, but they supplemented this evidence with vehicle mobility patterns around busy traffic junctions in the city. And that was very important to convince the health practitioners who were designing lockdown and relaxation strategies. Next slide. Here we're demonstrating how we have a very rigorous community awareness raising campaign where we leverage on our strength in handling disease epidemics and public health emergencies to use the same channels to communicate about air pollution. It is still an area that is not exactly very well funded. So you bring in things related to comedy, having drones, house to house, which are things we largely do when we have epidemics. And it's going to be the mode of communication that we use for air pollution. So here we brought experience from other public health emergencies and transfer them to air pollution management. Next slide. So we have had some actions being taken either by us as the air pollution management team or by everyone else as a result of the data that is available. And one of them was when government took an effort to distribute 1.8 million cylinders. We are all aware that uptake to clean energy use in African settings is generally prohibited by the cost. And most times the initial cost of having the gas, the LPG cylinder, as well as the cooking technology, the cooker. So we had a pilot where 1.8 million of such sets were given out to the community to act as a catalyst, so that then people could uptake this and continue moving forward. And this was guided by the fact that everyone is seeing that the pollution is actually worsening. But we also have very serious commitments from government promoting electric mobility. And nationally, we have a company manufacturing electric vehicles, electric buses. They are currently still very expensive, prohibitively expensive, but we have seen a few of the buses already on the road and they use solar, which is a step in the right direction. Next slide. The other action, of course, from our data, I've talked about this, is that development of the Clean Air Action Plan which we are implementing was guided by data, but now its implementation is still being tracked by seeing what's happening to the air pollution. So we are able to set realistic targets, not those, yes, guided by WHO, but you assess your progress towards targets based on what you said you would do, but also based on what the international community wants you to do. We are all aware that pollution has no borders. It can move from Lagos to. So you can't say for us in Nigeria, we have our own pollution, because it can find its way here. So we have our realistic targets as stated in the Clean Action Plan based on what we see from our monitors. Next slide. We are currently developing an air quality management policy specific for the city. We have national standards and regulations, but as you are aware, the city tends to present a different picture. So making sure that we are in line with international standards, the East African Community air quality standards, but also the national standards, we are guided by the current evidence that we have to say this is what we think it should be for the city. We hope within a year this can be finalized and approved. Next slide. There are other actions that have been guided by data, and one of them was an executive order from the president banning making of charcoal. So banning of charcoal and its sale and trade and distribution is currently illegal in Uganda. The enforcement of that executive order is a different thing, but at least we have that in action. The other one is updating the clean air, the climate change strategy. This has been revised based on the evidence from the air quality management network to a newer version. I think that this will be completed this year. Then we have a city. We are planning on implementing a citywide community sensing project, participatory air quality management. We have already secured funding, so we are finalizing plans of how we can have this to the people so that we sort of the Breathe Rwanda and Breathe Accra model to have that in Kampala. And we are already piloting clean energy use in city running institutions mainly. We have 3 institutions that we are piloting how they can use solar and biomass and other forms of energy to substitute biomass for energy for cooking. Next slide. So in summary, a data-driven air quality management journey is possible, especially for the resource-limited settings where we think that it's most times difficult, and the low-cost air quality monitoring networks, as long as you have a few reference stations, not necessarily owned by you, but owned by research institutions, is an inexpensive way of guiding your journey. You may not need gold standard data, but you need some data to guide your progress so that you just don't move anyhow like headless chicken. Policymakers and researchers need to collaborate synergistically. Most of the things that are presented here do not think they are owned by the government of the local government of Kampala. It's from GeoHealth Hub, it's from the Air Corps, we don't have a reference station as a city that we own, but we have 4 or 5 reference stations that we have access to because we are in charge of the city. 3, I think, from Makerere University and 1 from the US Embassy. So we can't say we don't have reference data. And importantly is that contextualizing the air pollution mitigation in the broader picture of health issues, global health security, and climate change can amplify the importance of air quality management and air pollution. If we not demonstrate how air pollution actually affects our health, I think that message may not make a lot of sense that there is air pollution. Then so what if there is air pollution? Next slide, which should be the last one. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Alex, for that presentation. Our next 2 presenters are online, so I'll want to check that Egide Kalisa is connected. So Egide is a research fellow at the University of Rwanda. He's joining us from Toronto, where he's just completed his postdoc at the University of Toronto. And his research interests are on child health, as you will see in his presentation. So Egide, over to you.
Yeah, thank you so much for this opportunity. It's a super early morning here in Toronto, but I'm glad I made it. So I'm Egide Kalisa, and today I'm talking about air pollution in Africa, creating a healthier city for humans. So when air pollution is bad, or when climate is warming, some people act, some do not. Can ask the question, why? Do some people have access to better information, or is better? When air pollution is bad or climate changing, some people get ill, some do not. Then why? Are some exposed than the others? So in my presentation, we'll be answering this question. Can we make African city kinder to the environment? Can we make African city healthier for humans? What can we do to help? As you know, this map may have been popular, looking how the Africa is affected by air pollution, also lack of the monitors. This is not only for general country, but as well as speaking for the school perspective, has been doing a research at the school, but look like most of the school setting policy has been well developed in high-income countries, and such policy, however, are non-existent in Africa. So in my research, I tried to use the local sensors to see how the school children in Rwanda are exposed to air pollution in classroom, around the school, as well as in transit to those locations. And further, I worked with children to look how air pollution education can influence children's behavior and reduce their risk to air pollution. So this is a figure, one of the research published very recently, actually the air pollution in the school. You may look the red line, which is the air pollution in play areas in outdoor school, where the indoor is the blue line. There's quite a high peak in a morning drop off the children in the school, as well as the pick up in the afternoon. And then after a few hours as well, the indoor pollution also became high. So air pollution at the school. So children are exposed during the morning because there's quite a highest peak of this black carbon. I'm talking to these figures in the early morning. And this also we found in the afternoon. And because of poor construction material with no ventilation, air pollution as well outside could also affect in the classroom. So the average annual concentration, because this was a 12-month study, in classroom was 8.15 microgram per cubic meter. Let's put in the Canadian context, the air pollution measured in the biggest highway in Canada was 1 microgram per cubic meter. You can see how the school children are really exposed to this type of pollution. Rwanda has established some of the car-free day, which actually happen twice a month. And this car-free day is just for mass exercise. With previous research have been quantify air pollution during these car-free days, but we found that the benefit of the car-free day is not only for mass exercise, but can reduce air pollution pretty much up to 30%. And however, if you look on this figure below, the green is the day on a car-free day, as well as the red is a non-car-free day. So if you look, there is quite this reduction, especially during the hours of car-free day and effect. However, still we see this reduction, the air pollution, the PM2.5 level is still high compared to the World Health Organization standard. So which means this is provide a clear link between traffic and air pollution, but however, we still need more measures. So, and this was also observed during the COVID-19, where air pollution, especially from outdoor, has been significantly reduced, but however, indoor was another story. So we try to quantify all the benefit. Actually, in next 5 years, we'll be recording around 26 car-free day, and this is expected actually to save around 1,000 disability adjusted life, avoid more than 600 hospital admission, and this could save around more than 3,000 for the day loss due to this illness. And the collectively, this benefit could yield millions of dollars. And this is also well observed when we try to say Rwanda has now established this, the e-motorbike in Kigali City, and is expected to be 100% in next 4 years or 5 years. So when you see what will be the benefit, the impact of scaling up this e-motor to 100% in Kigali City, we found that this will prevent the annual reduction of more than 70 kiloton carbon dioxide, which also will save a lot of actually disability adjust life. And then we also reduce the fuel import, and then save around actually 9 billion we spend on this fuel importation. And then at the end, we also reduce some of the air pollution problem. Recently, people are using different mode of transport. We try to monitor air pollution using different mode of transport, bus, cycling, motor, and walking. And we found that disadvantaged population, or the people walking, actually were the mostly affected by this higher burden of air pollution. And the lowest were found is for those traveling by bus, which we emphasize that if we have these well-functioned school buses, or we have our public transport system, can not only reduce congestion as well as save the expenditure on energy, and as well as a reduction of these greenhouses and air pollution. And we found that a modest reduction actually of the 10%, annual 10% of this on air pollution will lead it with several as well as dollar. And thanks also to the government of Rwanda establishing, launching, actual introduction more than 200 electrical buses, I think this year. So in my research, I try to engage with the children, give them the hands-off and experience, monitor air quality themselves, analyzing themselves, and reporting the result to their parent. Well, so I've been working with the children, giving them to assemble these local sensors, allow them to monitor air pollution at the school, at home, in transit to this location, and let the children understand how they are really exposed to air pollution. So some actually commit now to walk to school because they were being driven even they were in walkable distance to their school, and some also work with their parents. We will launch an anti-idling campaign because if you remember the previous figures, there is quite an increase of air pollution during the drop-off where the engines are on, idling in the front of the classroom. So some children take a lead to ask their parent, please stop your engine while dropping me off or picking up because you are contributing to air pollution in our school. You may find also some school arguing themselves, oh, my parent is no longer polluting than your parent. So it's quite important to see how this education can actually influence children's behavior so they can be reduced to the exposure to air pollution. And actually, this also article came a few hours ago in Rwanda, see how this we can mitigate this air pollution at the school. So Bogota is well known for bus rapid transit, Tokyo and here in Toronto for subway, Amsterdam and Copenhagen for cycling. African city could be also the city where a policymaker looking for effective e-motorbike as well as e-buses. I know some countries, especially in East Africa, Kenya, Rwanda, and others are having a lot of incentive also to launch these electrical motorbike, electrical buses. And we expect also this actually in the future to have a significant impact in terms of air pollution, climate change. So can we make African city kinder to the environment? Can we make African city healthier for human? What can we do to help? So I listed some of the recipe for healthier city. We are now moving in the century of the city where more population are living actually in urban area than in the rural areas. So I'd give you an example, and this is for Rwanda, but could be also the same as many African countries. Rwanda, back in the 90s, this is how the size was. After some few years, the city continued to expand, and this is also including also the increase in population. Around as well, other couple of years, the city is still expanding. Very recently, you can see it taking large steps. So as the city increase, as well as this associated with this human population growth, we expect this problem of air pollution could still be a problem if there is no tangible measures taken on hand. But however, if you look some of the vegetation, most of this country, there's still lack of the green spaces. And we know this green space can release oxygen, absorb this pollutant, intercept particulate matter, and then give shade to reduce the air temperature. I see some of the African cities, even when you're landing, there's still some the lack even of these green spaces, even compared to the other high-income countries. And this is an easy way to start working on this reduction. So back to our question, can we make African city kinder on environment? Can we make African city healthier for human? Or can you do to help? After the pandemic, there's quite actually some of the countries are taking measures to mitigate, because pandemic as a research shows us the link of human on environment. Now, the pandemic pushed forward the new generation of African scientists. Helmholtz came to be free by 2015. Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, Rosaland 43 USD from traffic congestion. Bogota is building its future around the bike. So I have listed here some of the recipe for healthier Africa. So what can we do? We need more green space. We need to connect those green space. We need sustainable environment. As also my colleague mentioned, we need to engage public and politicians. We need money, and we need research and collaboration. And thanks for this conference, actually provide a clear how we can also collaborate it with fellow research across the world. We need money, and also I'm glad for the government of Rwanda that's starting engage. Actually received it yesterday in the night virtually, started providing, supporting local research, try to provide some of solution to mitigate this issue alarming. So if we follow this recipe for healthier city, we will make city kinder on environment, we will make city healthier for us, and then we can make the difference. So thank you so much. That's the end of my talk.
Thank you, Egide. I don't know if some of us can move to Rwanda to receive some of that money. We'll have a discussion on funding, I think, towards the end of the day. So thank you for that positive energy. So next we have Sean Schmitz. Sean is with a postdoc at the Research Institute for Sustainability in Potsdam, Germany, which is where I think he's joining us from. He has research interests on air quality, the nexus between air quality, health, and mobility, and he'll be speaking to us about some of his work. So over to you, Sean.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, everyone. I would have loved to have been there with you in Ghana, but unfortunately I couldn't make it. But yeah, so I'm here in Potsdam, and I'd like to talk to you a bit about the work that we do in the Urban Air Quality, Mobility, and Health project here at the Research Institute for Sustainability. And I'll give you an example of this transdisciplinary approach that we do to using low-cost sensors to measure air pollution alongside mobility measures. But you might be asking yourself first, what exactly is transdisciplinary research? Well, there's still no accepted definition after 40 years of debate. This is typical for academia, but some key points that we guide ourselves with are this focus on the unity of knowledge, so transcending disciplinary boundaries, including multi- and interdisciplinary research, but as well as including non-academic societal actors in the entirety of the process. And so with this, we can then get a focus on real world situations and problems, and we can work in a more transformative manner. So we can go beyond simply doing research on these problems, but to actually proactively support action or intervention with regards to these problems. So an example being air pollution. What might this look like? Well, at RIFS, the approach is broken down into 3 key phases of research. This begins with the problem framing phase, which is where when you have an understanding of the scientific and societal problems in connection with any particular topic, you can start to gather your stakeholders, such as perhaps NGOs or policymakers, together with researchers to then co-define the research questions and goals. So you're planning the project together from the start with your societal actors. In the second phase, you'd actually do this research. So of course, that's more typical as you might expect it to be with data collection and analysis. But key in this is also the regular reporting of that progress. So meeting with your stakeholders and understanding if the work that you're doing is aligning with the interests of this project, or perhaps reformulating an approach. So perhaps when you're doing research alongside policies, as that policy environment may change in the course of your research, you can then adjust as need be. Once you have your research done, you can then apply this knowledge, ideally also with the inclusion of these societal partners to uptake the results into societal discussions, into further policy making. But it can also provide impulse for new research, and you can start to adapt and adjust your methodological approach as you need to new case studies. So when we're talking about policy, now this is a very European context, so I hope that there are some parallels with the African context, but I'll give this example where we do our research, which is in Berlin. Now, the laws and regulations are passed from the European Commission, which then are translated into federal laws at the member state level, so in Germany. Now, in Germany, there's another level below that, which is that within each federal state, so for example, Berlin, you then translate these laws into local laws. But what's interesting is that when you have these laws, oftentimes smaller policies, say transformations of mobility infrastructure or air pollution relevant policies will happen at the city district level. So in our case, the key partners that we work with are at the city district level, as well as the federal state level of Berlin. So we get this mix, and we can understand better the needs of these policy implementation timelines and what the research is intended to accomplish. As further context, in 2018, Berlin was the first federal state in Germany to pass a comprehensive mobility law, which is focused on developing a safe, barrier-free transport system with a large focus on safety, the idea being vision zero to reduce these injuries and death to an absolute minimum, but also to transform the mobility system, the mobility infrastructure in Berlin, which has historically been car-dominated, especially following World War II, to be more compatible with the actual city itself, the needs of its citizens, and the environment and the climate. What this has translated to is that across these city districts in Berlin, there have been a variety of new measures that have come into place. As you can see in the photo there on the right, there are now new protected bike lanes, dedicated cycling streets, as well as expansion of the public transport network. But of course, while these measures are not explicitly designed to tackle air pollution, they do have an impact on it, as any changes to the infrastructure will, especially mobility infrastructure, any removal of cars from the street or constriction of the flow of traffic will have an impact on air pollution and emissions. So despite having a comprehensive and extensive network of reference monitoring stations in Berlin, as you can see here, with 8 roadside stations and 5 urban and 5 rural background stations, Berlin is still a very, very large area. It's over 1,000 square kilometers. And so this is an incredibly useful network, and the data that is used can be very helpful to understand patterns of pollution in the city. But when these policies get put in place at a local level, perhaps in one street, it's insufficient to actually understand if locally there was any impact on air quality, where you might actually see that impact. And so this is where low-cost sensors come into play. And what we do is we use these EarthSense Zephyrs, which thankfully we have a research agreement with EarthSense itself that allows us access to the raw data, not just their calibrations, but we have our own raw data, which allows us to develop or has allowed us to develop this 7-step open source calibration methodology. This is online and it's available. There's an update to the code forthcoming. So this is something that anyone could download and use if you're interested. As you can see, the DOI is here. If you can't write it down quickly enough, I can feel free to reach out and I can send it to you later. The benefit here, though, is once we have these data for, say, NOx, ozone, and PM, we can then assess and we can deploy these sensors at high spatial resolution in connection with these policies that come into place. So the example that I'd like to share with you today is one that happened on the Friedrichstraße in the heart of Berlin. It's a pretty busy street, and in 2020, this busy street was closed entirely to motorized traffic, as you can see in the photo below here. And it was then not only closed to motorized traffic, but it was opened to pedestrians and cyclists. So it transformed completely within the course of this measure. And we wanted to then measure before and after this was put into place. And through our partners in the city, we were made aware of it and aware of their interest. They had been measuring using passive samplers, as you can see in the photo here, but passive samplers only have a 2-week time resolution. So in our case, we were then able to deploy stationary Zephyrs on lampposts and use our reference measurement bike to take some measurements locally in accordance, in association with the timeline of this measure, which allowed us then to measure here, as you can see, within the radius of where the street was closed, this 3 or 4 block radius, we measured on the street and on the side streets to understand what might be happening to the air quality there directly as a result of the measure and on the side streets, potentially as a result of changes in traffic patterns. So when we look at the results here, these are normalized nitrogen dioxide concentrations. So that means we've removed the influence of the urban background, so say removing the average urban background NO2 concentration, to then isolate the local contribution on that street, so the roadside impact of NO2. As you see here on the far left of this set of box plots, these are the results from the Friedrichstraße. So in the dark red, these are the normalized concentrations before the measure was put in place, and in the dark blue, this was after the measure was put into place. And so you can see there was a clear reduction in this roadside impact, and it seems that that roadside impact was reduced to 0, as you might expect with the complete removal of motorized traffic. But there was no statistical difference between the concentrations we measured there and the urban background, both on weekdays and weekends following the implementation of this measure. So this is a nice example highlighting that we were able to directly measure a local impact of this policy on air quality. Now, on the side streets, the theory was that with increase in traffic on the side streets, we might see an increase in NO2 concentrations as well. And despite this almost doubling of traffic on both side streets, we did not see an increase relative to the urban background in NO2 concentrations. And as this is a common argument that is used against such measures, it was interesting not only to understand the impact locally on the Friedrichstraße itself, but also on the side streets as a result of this change in mobility infrastructure. So thankfully, with our partners, the phase 3 of this transdisciplinary engagement was that we were able to have some nice uptake of our research and our results into societal discussions through various articles in local newspapers, but also into political discussions, as the results that we had were directly incorporated into the final evaluation report by the Berlin Senate for Environment and Mobility, alongside noise assessments of noise pollution, traffic, and business changes in business on the street itself. And as a result of this, there has been further ongoing discussion about what to do with this measure. Unfortunately, with a change in government, this measure wasn't removed entirely. And unfortunately, the results that we showed here with improvements in air quality were not taken into consideration with that decision. It was more a political choice that was campaigned upon by the new government. So it was interesting to be a part of this this change in policy, as well as measuring alongside it in the past years. So as a result, this was one example, but also in other examples in Berlin. And this is ongoing work that we've now continued with a third-party funding contract from the city of Berlin to assess various new measures. We were able to show that these local policies can have an impact on hyperlocal pollution exposure and on pollution levels. And this exemplifies the usefulness of low-cost sensors and their ability to use their lower costs, but also their potential for dynamic and high spatial resolution deployments to do these kinds of research projects alongside policies. And it also highlights, finally, the impact of transdisciplinary research on societal and political relevance of results. So thank you so much for your attention, and thank you also to our partners.
Thank you so much, Sean. I think I like your message there at the beginning. Whereas your research is static throughout, the policy environment keeps changing, and you need to adapt to that change. So at this stage, I will hand over to my two co-moderators, Victor Indasi, who will run the Q&A in the room, and Becky Garland, who will do the same online. I don't know if we should ask Alex to take the hot seat.
Yeah, please. And yeah, just raise up your hand and I'll come through. You are closer to me, so let me go furthest and come.
Yeah, so for the first speaker, thank you very much for your presentation and then the solutions that you are, I think the second speaker online, yes. He was talking about how they are going to improve air quality, especially within the urban areas. And some of the solutions that he listed was improving the bus systems. I've always had some worries about using the bus systems, especially when we talk about going electric, using the electric vehicles. Quite recently, there has been a problem with those using the electric vehicles, especially when it comes to the weight. It's about 30% much more heavier than the regular ones. And some parking lots and routes are not able to contain this. Considering the climate that we have in Africa, especially within the tropics, our roads are not, the quality of the roads are not good. The weight of the cars, if it increases, especially when it comes to electric buses, it's going to affect the road networks, and we are going to spend much more money to develop more roads to contain these buses. So I think from the last speaker, he was saying that we should design a transport system that fits certain areas. So I think maybe we may have to look much more into that to see how each cities can be improved, especially through the transportation sector. And also, I think the second one is about plant and improving the air quality through the plant. And that is an eco-based system solutions. I would like to know if for them, they are checking some of the plants and how they're able to absorb some of the pollutants from the atmosphere, or especially the gases from the atmosphere, and how they are performing. What kind of plants are they, and how are they going to implement that, especially within the urban areas?
Okay, thank you for the question. I'll start with the last one and say how the plant design is specific species may be able to reduce this pollution compared to that. So as far as I'm concerned, there's quite a lot of research going on how these plant species actually are able to reduce some of the traffic emission. So also I was emphasizing that it is actually to have this green vegetation barrier, because we already have some of the school located to some of the busy roadway. And then very recently research actually in the UK found that these green barriers actually can protect the air pollution for the school. So, and then there's quite a lot of publication available. You can now see linking this green space as well as the air pollution. Okay, so we are not really, doing the research on what are the specific species, but I know some ongoing research are trying to do, because they may not all the plant be able to reduce at the same time, but I think there are certain also species which are really doing well compared to the others. So, and speaking to that, we are doing an intervention study trying to set the green space around the school, and then to monitor air pollution without green space or green vegetation around the school with those who already have it, and see what will be the difference. This is the research that's currently going on in Kigali. Or speaking to bus, electrical bus, this is actually, the question has been almost raised every day. So something where the source coming from, maybe the source also contributes to pollution, but we are lucky, I think most of African kind of the source of this electricity, it's a hydro power, I guess. So speaking to that, yes, you said these electrical vehicles will increase to more route. Yeah, that's good. So if they have this infrastructure, we need those. But let's take to the Rwanda country. Rwanda has been working with Volkswagen, establishing assembling the new electrical vehicles in Rwanda, and it has been operated almost few years in the past. And then if you look actually on this, there's quite an importance, because Rwanda has incentives, and whoever importing electrical cars, whoever have anything related, any business related to this e-mobility has a zero tax. And this is happened. So many people has been investing in this e-mobility, and quite also we can see the benefit. We have been completing very recent research because of e-motorbike. We have maybe hundreds of electrical motorbike on the road. But if you talk to the drivers, say not only does a motorbike emit zero emission, but also they save money for the fuel because of zero maintenance. I can say this is a project that is going on piloting, and I think, I believe in the coming years, this could be important, because speaking to Rwanda, yes, there's a problem. Rwanda is a country of hills, but still the government also is trying also to work on those infrastructure to accommodate those technologies. And so far, there's not any issue has been raised, but however, there's also some of the saving actually compared to the fuel costs as well as to electricity. And then still and piloting, and I believe and coming years it could be also maybe 100% electric. And everything we are doing research, working with different institutions, collaborating to see how actually these policies are being effective, and is creating this new infrastructure which we need. This is how I can answer your question. So, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Rebecca, please go ahead with the online question before we come to you.
Sure, yeah, thanks. We've had a good discussion online, actually. So I'll set the question, and then maybe Egide and Sean, you can summarize your responses, and we can move to the people in person as well. So the question comes from Mohit Gupta asking, are there any policy in Africa on certification and use of low-cost sensors? Are any questions raised by government agencies on data gathered using such sensors? And then also there was a bit of a discussion, and it came out that, This is particularly true for NGOs who will use low-cost sensors, but maybe don't have access to reference monitors. So then how are these data seen? How can these data be used? So maybe may I ask Egide and Sean to make a comment, and then we can move into the room. And also I wanted to note Victor Lindelane has joined us as well.
Thank you.
Yes, I think I can comment a little bit and ask my colleague to continue. I mean, speaking to that, this is actually most challenge people has been facing, especially when you're using these low-cost monitors to monitor air pollution and share the result to the government. Say, how trustable are these low-cost sensors? And then they don't really believe maybe. So they provide the data that can underestimate or overestimate. So as we did, we actually, because we have the reference monitor, we collocated those losses and then we calibrate. Then we say, hey, these local sensors can actually provide reliable data as a reference station. And then they can trust the data. And then through we use these local sensors also to provide the high quality publication, peer-reviewed. Then they can convince the government this is also it's a reliable data. However, as far as I'm concerned, there is any certification maybe of these local sensors. I know in Africa, and maybe if someone know could be mention it. Yeah, but that is we use those reference to calibrate those local sensors. Yeah.
Yeah, I could definitely jump right in on that exact point. It's a very similar situation in a European context, where at the moment there's no infrastructure in place to accommodate low-cost sensor data in a policymaking context. Again, because of questions of uncertainty, of accuracy. There are efforts at the moment ongoing at the European level among researchers to establish this framework, to understand exactly what the uncertainty is, and to have a standardized set of calibration like SOPs in place, so that when you have this data, you know exactly what you're working with. Now, part of the issue, though, is also that this the market for low-cost sensors has exploded in recent years, and many of the calibrated data that you get from suppliers is black box, and as a result, with these black box calibration methodologies, you can't quite understand, or you can't be certain under what context they were calibrated, to what extent they are accurate, unless, as my colleague suggests, you collocate with reference instrumentation. In Europe, with a large enough network of reference instruments, it seems that the priority hasn't been for low-cost sensors. But there are some steps in the direction to improve their usefulness, and one of these is also having more open source calibration methodologies. So yes. There's steps in the right direction.
Yeah, the first one is more of a comment regarding the greening projects in cities as a way to regulate air pollution. But there is also a danger that one needs to be aware of, that the interaction between biogenic volatile organic compounds and anthropogenic emissions could lead to increased ground level ozone, as has been shown in some studies. So the type of tree you plant is also very important, and that needs to be taken into consideration. Not all trees are good enough. My second point is to Alex. He mentioned that you're encouraging people to use sawdust for cooking instead of wood. Did I hear it correctly? Okay, so I misheard you then. Okay, I take the question back.
Okay, thank you much. I think we have one colleague who has joined us, so he'll have maybe 10 minutes. Give us guidance.
Thank you. My name is Ndyabakira. I'm from the city of Johannesburg, and I'll be presenting to you the Johannesburg innovative use of local sensor data to embrace ambitious clean air targets. I work as a specialist in air quality monitoring here. First and foremost, what I would like to say is that the City of Johannesburg Air Quality Program, we have taken proactive measures to address community concerns and prioritize public health. And then we have done so by conducting ambient air quality monitoring in the city. for a number of years. And then how we do this ambient air quality monitoring, we do it using the traditional reference methods of monitoring. However, reference air quality instruments are very expensive to purchase and maintain, as you all know. So we were looking for other alternative measures which are not that expensive to actually supplement the monitoring that we're doing in the city. So in 2021, we introduced a program through the use of low-cost sensors, whereby these sensors were donated to us from the GIZ. And then ultimately, I think in total, we got 6 of these sensors that were donated to us. And then they were deployed throughout the city. The sensors were from a manufacturer called Clarity Node S Clarity. And then the type of sensor is the Clarity Node S sensors. So we have deployed these sensors throughout the city, but also when we're deploying them, we made sure that we do not deploy them in areas where we already have the continuous ambient air quality monitoring analyzers or monitoring stations. So we deployed them in the urban area, like Senten, for example, and also in congested areas like downtown CBD. And also we allocated some within Newtown city center here. So this experience to us is a first. We've never really used these sensors before. So it was an exciting experience. And ultimately what we intended to do here was just to see how these sensors work, and just have a feeling of how they work, because it was a first for us. We are used to using the continuous traditional reference methods that we use. So as you all, maybe some of you might not know, but maybe some of you might know these Clarity Node sensors that we're using. These are the flagship devices from this Clarity Movement company. They're very self-sufficient, and then they use a solar harvesting with an internal battery, and then also use a global cellular communication system. And then they measure NO2 and PM, PM1, PM2.5, and also particulate matter. But in South Africa here, as required by law, we only look into PM10 and PM2.5 because we have standards for that. And then it also measures temperature and also relative humidity. So our approach was involved in deploying a network of these clarity devices strategically throughout the city, providing a high resolution and air quality data in real time. And then, like I said, this was also done just to supplement the already existing air quality network, which uses the reference monitoring instrument. And then most importantly is that deploying these clarity node sensors near sensitive populations and in areas where reference monitoring instruments are not placed. And then so we found that it's a smart approach. And then, because this was the first time, we also look at the microsighting, and then this is how we deployed these sensors all around the city using those guidelines of microsighting of these local sensors. And then this is myself here deploying one of the sensors here in Braamfontein, Johannesburg, and also with my colleagues there. And then here we're deploying some there in Senten City and also in Newtown. And then as you can see here, mounting them on a pole. And then as you can see here, this is one of the sensors that we've deployed. We've co-located this one with a reference monitoring station. As you know that when you are working with local sensors, at least you must have at least one that you have co-located, so that at a later stage you can then do a comparison against the reference monitors. And then this is just a satellite image for the local sensors that we've deployed throughout the city. As you can see there on the map, and I'm using the Clarity Movement website here because they do allow us to actually, when you are a client, you can then actually use their system in terms of viewing the data, viewing the sensors where we have deployed them, and also doing the manipulation of the data. And then this is just where we have located them. You can see this one in Deep Kloof, where it's co-located there. Deep Kloof is actually a residential area, but we have a station there that has actually most of the reference monitors here there. And then you can see some of the areas there, Rodiport, which is also a residential area. Newtown is actually in the city center here, as well as in Braamfontein and Senten. Those are city centers. So when we deployed this thing, obviously data collection was the most important thing, because you want to have a reliable instrument that works and that provides you data that is credible for scientific purposes, so that at least when you're doing the analysis and when you're comparing it with the reference monitors, you know that you're using something that works. So the data that we get from these sensors will not only, it will provide valuable insights, but it will also empower the city to make informed decisions regarding air quality management. But you all know that obviously with this data, we don't really use it for regulatory purposes or for enforcement, because we're not there yet here in South Africa. I'm not sure, maybe if other countries are doing it, but it's just for the purpose of understanding the behavior of the pollutants that we're measuring with these sensors in certain areas and how they're changing over time. So our future intentions is also investing further in these local sensors, because now we have over 2 years of experience using these things. And then we found that at least they do provide some of the information that is necessary. And then they are also, supplementing. If you are to look at the way we do continuous ambient air quality monitoring, our stations are scattered far apart. So therefore you leave a gap in between because you have a station in another region, and then you travel kilometers away further, you have another station. So you're not really actually covering the whole monitoring of the air pollution in the city. So you will need these sensors in between those areas where you're not monitoring, so to have an understanding of the air pollution in those areas. So data is the basis of understanding air pollution and the first step in mitigating it. So to us, data is everything, because we cannot make an informed decision or evidence-based decision without the data. So these sensors are very crucial that they work and they provide data that is reliable. Also, the use of these local sensors, we saw that it could help us uncover the disparities which are frequently linked to let me just move this, linked to racial and economic inequalities. If you know, for example, in South Africa, if you look at our history, how we have been, racially segregated, just looking at the history, so there are areas whereby they were not really much taken care of during those times. So at least, and also monitoring in those areas in terms of air pollution was not really also taken care of. So using these local sensors, we can then deploy them in some of those areas. That is why most of our ambient air quality monitoring analyzes the traditional way of measuring. We have deployed most of these stations in those previously disadvantaged areas, like we call them townships here in South Africa, and also in informal settlements in South Africa, because that is where most of the pollution comes from. So we also want to deploy a lot of these sensors in those areas, for an example. But also what this could do for us is that it could help us have what you call a hybrid network, whereby we are then monitoring ambient air quality through the use of traditional methods, like your reference monitors, but at the same time, conduct ambient air quality monitoring through the use of local sensors. So therefore, there you are doing your hybrid ambient air quality monitoring. One of the things is that the National Department of Fisheries and Forestry in South Africa is aware of these things, and then they're taking it seriously and they're very supportive, to a point whereby, since we've been using these local sensors, they've now asked to incorporate this data that we have into the South African Air Quality Information System. But however, like I'm saying, this is just for information purposes, so that at least, they can have, we can then create a baseline. So we don't use this for regulatory purposes as yet and enforcement, because we just use them for indicative monitoring purposes. So just for the purpose of time, I just want to move quickly, because some of the things here I've touched. But also one of the things that we saw is that these instruments, they're very cheap, compared to actually having a full set of air quality monitoring station. So the benefits is that we will have reduced initial costs when setting up the network. You don't require a lot if you are deploying them around the city. And then they can enhance data resolution and coverage, and the flexibility to customize the network according to the specific requirements of each region, because regions differ, because different air pollutants are emitted in different areas. So there are some of the initiatives that we, as the city, we are doing. For example, the promotion of sustainable transportation. There's what we call a vehicle emission strategy that has been put in place. This is a strategy that when we're conducting a quality management plan, it was one of the interventions that we thought we could come up with. And then also currently right now we are doing a low emission zone. But to actually get an understanding of the data and get an indicative, you need to actually put a lot of these local sensors in those areas where you're doing this, or where you're implementing these strategies, for an example. But also important, you need to do public awareness. For an example, we've seen that we also need to do public awareness so that people are aware that there is these things that are measuring air pollution, and then they can access the data, since now it is going to be included into the South African Air Quality Information System, so that they can plan their day-to-day activities, for an example. We do have an air quality management plan, which next time when we decide to maybe review, we can then incorporate these local sensors in as part of expanding our network and incorporating them to do a hybrid air quality monitoring in the city. So these are the sensors that we have. And then we assess, we look at the sensor performance, and then we analyze the performance of the clarity. And then how we did that, we did the co-locating of the devices with the reference monitors. So we compared the performance of the data with the reference monitors, and then we applied the models whereby you do corrections, adjustment, and calibrations. And then, but in these instances, we requested clarity to assist us. Yeah, I'm summarizing. So this is just the data. We're looking at the uncalibrated data together with the reference data and also the calibrated data. As you can see, the gray one is the uncalibrated, the black one is the reference, and the blue one is the calibrated. So you can see the performance of this analysis. And then ultimately, we then use the dashboard to do the analysis, the manipulation of the data, and so forth. And then this is the NO2 data which has been calibrated from the sensor. So ultimately, I will conclude there, and then I don't think I'll have to go through them because of time. But I think in the city of Joburg is looking to invest further and then to learn more. And then I think from now, because the contract is ending on to using these sensors, we're then going to use the data to see what kind of other interventions we can do using that data which we have collected from those sites. And then it will inform us on what interventions we can put in place. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We are at time, but thank you for that, Lindelani. I think you brought about one of the struggles we had when we were preparing this session, is that our sensors being used for policy action or regulatory action. I think Lindelani was very clear in terms of how they are not using them for enforcement yet, but they are using them for some kind of to inform some of their policy actions. So with that, I think we are at time for this session. I would like to hand it over back to Tony.
Yeah, thank you.